Thank you and welcome to Start of Grind Houston. It is March 8th, International Women's Day, and I am excited because we are focusing, the entire global organization of Startup Grind is focusing on Web3 for 2022. And in the process of doing that, looking at what are all the subtopics that we can bring to you and start learning about together. The other thing that I want to bring up and share with you is that what Houston's chapter is doing different, and since we're online, everybody around the world can tune in, is we are making sure that we're bringing you women or brown, Asian, indigenous, Black speakers on these topics. Yes. So we're choosing to do it a little differently than everybody. There's all kinds of guys who are really popular in this space, and I'm about giving women the mic. So that's what you can count on from Startup Grind Houston this year. And, you know, for those of you, if this is your first time coming to an event of ours, Startup Grind is the largest startup entrepreneurial organization in the world. Right now, we're in about 600 cities, 125 countries. And one of the things that makes us really different and unique is you will find that we really live by our values. And I want to verbally thank Derek Anderson for putting that framework together and inviting us and allowing us all to align with him around those values. And they're make friends, give first, and help others. Quick announcement. April, let's see, I'm looking at my notes here. April 12th through the 13th is going to be Startup Grind's global conference. Now, normally I'd be there in person. This year I'm not. But what I can tell you is, besides the overarching theme of Web3, they're going to be doing some really different and new things this year around our global conference. So I invite you to go to startupgrind.com, dive into that, make yourself a cup of coffee, see what's going on, who you want to learn from, who you want to hear from. You're going to be able to listen to a lot of the talks streaming. So for those of you that it's still not an opportunity or safe or viable for you to travel to Redwood City, you'll be able to attend with us online. Now, my request is, if you have any questions today, please drop them in the chat box. Because I'm going to tell you, being neurodivergent, it helps me to stay focused and deliver you value when I don't get distracted by people verbally injecting into our conversation today. Our focus today is blockchain and content creation and content creators. And we've divided our time up into some interesting and fun ways for us to cover this topic. Those of you who've been to some fireside chats before, you're used to the framework of, we'll talk about a little bit of the history, then we'll talk about what's happening present day, and then we tend to talk about in the future. Well, we're kind of using that framework, but today we're going to think more of the first one as the intro. You know, what are some of the high level things that are happening in Web3 as well as blockchain? And then why blockchain, why now? What's different than what maybe we covered when we had the Israel chapter and their experts share with us about 3 years ago some things that were going on in blockchain. So we've been talking about this topic with you guys for a while, and then we'll wrap up with what are some of the opportunities, what are the opportunities now, the potential opportunities, the opportunities that we don't quite know of yet. So I want to ask Jennifer to please go ahead and turn your video on. And, you know, I find that when I'm attending events, I actually like to hear what the guest has to say about themselves versus listening to someone deliver a canned introduction. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what is your expertise.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Michelle, for inviting me to come and share about blockchain. As you said, my name is Jennifer Navarrete, and in 2005, I heard about this thing called podcasting. And when I realized that I could record something, put it up on the web, and no one could stop me, I was like, sign me up. And that really is the beginning of where you find me now. This curiosity, this ability to see where new technology, which isn't maybe accepted by the mainstream yet, I can see where it's going. And now, of course, nowadays podcasting is, very well mainstream. And we look at things like social media, which in the early days of, let's say 2007, 2008, businesses were like, oh, that's for kids, that's not for business. And we know now social media is for everyone, globally for everyone. And then I look at blockchain in that same way. So I call myself a blockchain enthusiast in addition to being a podcast producer, a virtual event producer, a content strategist, a speaker, and any number of other things that those of us who are in this space typically generally do. But yeah, blockchain has really captured my attention, and over the course of the time that we do this session, I think folks will understand why.
Yes. And it's funny because I'd invite people to make sure that you do go. And what I'll do is I will include that in our follow up email today. But make sure you do go follow Jennifer on Twitter. She's really active there. I think, was that the place that we met each other? Because we were both fairly early adopters in the Twitter space.
It may be. I know that we were both also active in social media club and social media
Mm,
breakfast and those early types of organizations that were really galvanizing and gathering a lot of those early adopters so that we could all learn, share, grow together, and then spread that knowledge to our local communities.
yes. And that makes me think of something I hadn't thought of in our earlier conversations of prepping for today. But let's talk about that for a second because it's showing up in a way where it's kind of fascinating to watch who are the risk takers and who are not. So let's discuss what's the difference between an early adopter, and it's not a better than,
Mm-mm.
it's more of recognizing the qualities of what's an early adopter, what you can learn from early adopters, and then what do you see as the subsequent roles that come from that time continuum of adoption.
Sure. And this early adopter aspect isn't new to web. I mean, if we think about people who were adventurers back in the day, they would go and, take off. I mean, you look at people who, went and did adventures across the globe, and they were early adopters of exploring and of different cultures and of different countries. And then it happens, of course, here. If we think about modern day, you hear about Web3 being compared to the Wild West. Well, that comparison was how folks spoke about social media. It was the Wild West. You could, and the web in the 90s, the Wild West. And the reality is, the Wild West is both wonderfully amazing, filled with opportunities, but it's also filled with a lot of challenges. And potentially, you could be the person on the Oregon Trail. So the Wild West isn't all, this wonderful thing. There's the pro and the cons, there's the yin and the yang to anything that we do in life. So if you're an early adopter, then you're also looking at the fact that you're typically someone who looks at something and wants to go learn more about it. So that's why the social media club motto of learn, share, grow really spoke to me, because I hadn't been able to really the way that I've always approached everything I do in life, I never had three simple words that explained it. But now I do. When I find something that interests me, I will go learn about it. And as I learn about it, I will share what I'm learning. And as I share what I'm learning with folks, if they are interested, they will go and do their own exploration. And then we come back and we learn and share together. And in that way, we all grow together. So if you're someone who is an early adopter, then you're the person that when you're excited about something, the rest of the world thinks you're speaking Klingon, because you're speaking a crazy language. They don't know why you're excited about it. It doesn't make any sense. It has no application in the real world. You're off in Fantasy Island. But the reality is, it's just, and don't lose heart, by the way, if that's you. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people that are telling you you're wasting your time, because ask me how I know. But then all of a sudden, as the world starts to catch up and these things that we've been doing for years becomes mainstream, then the opportunities to learn, the opportunities to share what you've done and to become someone who is knowledgeable in this area is there, because you have an archive of content. you have this ability, to have all of this knowledge that you've had over time to gather that together with folks. So I will say that if you're someone who's uncomfortable with that early adoption, the uncertainty, if the Wild West isn't for you, or you're having to, have ruts on the road, there's no paved road, there's no sidewalks, there's no tarmac, there's nothing. It's wilderness and you've got to hack it out. If that makes you uncomfortable, wait. There's no rush. There's plenty of time to get into things. And if you want it to wait until it becomes more mainstream, where maybe at least there's a gravel road or a dirt road, and you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with that, wait for that moment. Keep an eye on it. If you know folks that are early adopters and are constantly, charging into new things even when you're not ready for them, keep an eye on them, because eventually it will get to where you're comfortable with it. And maybe you're not comfortable with the gravel road. Maybe you need it to be a paved road. And maybe a paved road is good enough, but maybe you really want a highway. And until it becomes an interstate, you're not ready to go on that path. That's okay too. There's plenty of opportunity. And what I find a lot of folks doing is they feel like they're missing, and they have to hurry, hurry, hurry. Don't put pressure on yourself like that. My words of encouragement are there's plenty of time for it to work for you. And that's really what any of these tools, whether it's the web, whether it's social media, whether it's podcasting, whether it's blockchain or Web3, there's plenty of time and it needs to work for you. And you shouldn't get swept away by all of the kind of the hype that you hear. Just make it work for you.
I love that. I absolutely love that energy, because you're so right. So many times people tend to lead with emotion instead of using their questions to help them determine, is this timing right for me? And it's something that I talk with clients, and especially, since I'm in the leadership space, of just learn to use those questions to help you determine, is this the door I need to walk through now? Or is this maybe the classroom I just need to sit down and learn from? And that's what I love about how you deliver a lot of your content, is my impression or my experience with it is you come at it from an educator's perspective. And I love how practical it is, because it allows people to feel comfortable with the unknown. And that's what early adopters do. We, as you say, charge into the unknown.
Well, and then I also want to tell folks that a lot of times the vibe that you have is that you feel like you must know all the things. And you don't. No one knows all the things. The people that you think know all the things, they don't know all the things. Here's the reality is that I am very open to experimentation. As a matter of fact, anyone who follows me knows that every single month I have a new experiment. And what I do with my experiments is I share them publicly. Here's this thing I want to try, and I'm going to do it for this month. And if it could be like this, wonderful win, or it could be a fantastic failure. But the only way I will know is by giving it a try. And I experiment in public, because when you experiment in public, it takes away the pressure of needing to feel like you have it on lock, like you know all the things. And anyone who's any kind of space in it for any amount of time, and you're looked up as someone who's a leader in the space, or you're looked at someone who's an authority in the space, or someone who's knowledgeable and an expert in the space, there's a little bit of that feeling like you feel like you can't be experimental, like you can't try new things, because what if it fails, and what are people going to say? Does that ruin my reputation? Are people not going to trust what I have to say? And I have to tell you, if that's something that's harping on your back, throw it out the window. It doesn't serve you. Be open to experimentation, because we can't know all the things, but we can be open with that so that folks can come on the journey with us. And if they can come on the journey with us, then again, it's that learn, share, grow. And some of my experiments have been like, they were so successful that they became a product, they became a service, they became a podcast, they became a video, they became things, missions, causes that I'm behind. Others were so terrible that I'm like, no, that didn't work at all. And it's okay, because it's not you who failed, it's the experiment who failed. Because if we knew what the outcome would be, it would be a for sure. But it's not a for sure, it's an experiment.
This is exactly why I say we need 75% women at all decision-making tables everywhere, because we approach things really differently. And I love that approach about you. Now you've got me thinking over here about our values just in single words. Every time you say learn, share, grow, I'm going, friends, give, help.
Yeah, these are tags, right? If we think back to the early days of social and Twitter, tags. A lot of people, I would host events and I'd say, give me your three tags, give me your three tags. And people would stand up and it would force them to really, you'd think about a 15-second elevator pitch. Tags is, maybe 15 seconds. And it gave just the really short nugget of the three things that were really important to you. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't expand upon those things, but really being concise on what matters to you, it certainly cuts through a lot of the flowery messaging. Leave the flowery messaging for your website.
And that's an excellent doorway for us to start talking about this first segment of our conversation. What exactly do you see when you're looking at Web3? And then once you share that, what made you want to walk through the blockchain door?
Mm. So imagine a world where every single piece of content that you create, whether it's a microblog post, whether it's a photo, whether it's a video, whether it's live stream, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a social post, insert any type of content that you are creating right now on Web2. So imagine a world where every single piece of that is monetizable. Well, that world exists. It's on the blockchain. It's as simple as that. It took me a moment to kind of grasp that concept. March of last year, I had a friend contact me and said, "Hey, I've been doing this thing for a couple years and I really think that you should take a look at this." And it's my good friend Shane Mata, who I've known for many years through podcasting and we've done events together. And when Shane takes the time to reach out to me and says, "You really should look at this," I'm like, "I probably should really look at this." And he showed me what it was. And I was like, "I think I did something like this back in 2017." And I had. In 2017, I joined a blockchain and I'd created like 4 posts and I was like, meh, and I'd walked away. But when he was showing it to me now, blockchain as a content creation destination had grown up. There was a lot there. And before it was very kind of clunky. So when I talk about blockchain, specifically for me, Jennifer, I am talking about it as a content creation destination, period. As a place that you can take the types of content that you're creating now, but instead of putting it on Web2, instead of putting it on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, insert Twitch, you put that on the blockchain. And when you put it on the blockchain, because it's on the blockchain, and I say the blockchain, there's a lot of blockchains, but I'm just using it as a general term. Because you put it on the blockchain, every single piece of content is potentially monetizable. And you're like, well, how does that happen? Well, right now on Twitter, if you like a tweet that I said, you can give it a little heart, a like. And if you want to reply to what I said, you can reply. And if you want to share it, you can share it. Okay. Simple stuff. You can do that on the blockchain. But if you do that on the blockchain, every single action has a reward value associated with it that's tied to the blockchain, whichever blockchain it is that you're on, because they all have their own tokens and coins. So instead of a like, it's called an upvote. And that upvote has a value to it. And it took me a little bit. I started March of last year when Shane contacted me and I started looking at this again. And I kind of would create a little content and I'd be like, oh, $1 worth of reward on there. That's interesting. And sometimes it was like, oh, 2 cents of value on what it ranged, it ranged, it ranged. There wasn't like it was steady. And sometimes it was zero because not everything that all the content we create is like sunshine and flowers. Sometimes it's a dud. And no one creates content that's amazing every single time. I don't care who you are. There's usually some that are better than others. And again, it's what does it resonate with the audience? So that was really what got me to look at it the second time, was recognizing that the same behaviors I was doing on Web 2, I could do on Web 3, but there was a reward system built into it, which is vastly different than there is on Web 2, even though in theory on Web 2 you can monetize what you're doing, but typically the path on that is that you have to start from zero and build your audience and build your brand and build your reputation and build your content. And if we take YouTube as an example, on YouTube, in order to be part of their partner program, which is where you can monetize your content, you need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watched hours within the last 12 months. So you have to qualify in order to be considered for monetization. On Twitter, they have a Sparks program. You have to apply and be approved. There's all of these creator programs that Web 2 has, and I applaud them for it. Please know I'm not bashing Web 2. It has a place. It helped me do what I do today. The living that I do right now is based on all the stuff that's happened on Web 2. I just see this as the next iteration of it. And in a way that there's ownership tied to it as well as a reward system. So it's not Twitter, it's not Facebook, it's not YouTube that's making money. It's you and me. It's me as the content creator and you as someone who engaged with that content. The reward system goes between the two of us.
And that's an area that I find a lot of people really don't understand or recognize because they haven't had the opportunity to even kind of dive into the basics. They haven't been asking a set of questions because they're busy doing other things with their business. So I'm hearing a couple of things that even though you and I both know what you're talking about, I'm going to take a tiny step backwards and ask you to explain so that all of us can come forward together who's listening to this, whether it's now or later. Talk about the difference just real quickly of the definitions of Web 1, 2, and 3. We talked a little bit about it last month, but I love how you explain things.
Sure. Yeah, that's really good. I have a tendency to fire hose folks, so write your questions down and we'll do the Q&A at the end or reach out to me or Michelle. So, okay, the way I saw a meme and I've tried to find it again and I can't find it, but the meme goes something like this. Web 1, which is in the 90s. In Web 1, companies made content, companies made money. So if we think about that, in the US, that was AOL. Let's take that as an example. AOL was a place where we all went and they created the content, we consumed that content, and they made the money. Okay, check. Then we go to Web 2, which is the place that we find ourselves in now. And Web 2 is that users or content creators made the content and companies made the money, right? Not to say we can't make money. We can make money. We can sell courses. We can sell workshops. We can monetize it ourselves. There's all kinds of things we can do. We can eventually, over time, after building up our platforms and building up our community, we can eventually be considered for monetization within these Web 2 platforms, right? We can apply. We can be, all kinds of things. So we can qualify for those types of things. But the just default from tweet one, could I made money on tweet one? No, no. And even now, the Sparks program is brand new. So there's limited amount of time. It's US only. If you're in another country, too bad you can't apply for the Sparks program at this point, which is not fair because Twitter is a global platform, but of course there's a lot of things to go. And then if we go to Web3, which is what I'm talking about, creating content on the blockchain, then users or content creators make the content, you and me, and users make the money, you and me. Simple as that. It's just so simple. And when I finally understood what that meant, I was like, oh, holy cow, this is what it should have been all along. It should have been this the whole time. And it wasn't because that concepting didn't exist, but it exists now. And I'll go back to the concepting of the early adopter. Please know that if you're hearing this and you're feeling like you're missing the boat, it's still so early. It really is. This is the time, and this session that we're doing right now is a great opportunity to begin your learning process. Start reading, start following folks, start watching, but also don't leave your common sense at the Web 3.0 door because you're going to see a lot of things that you feel like, oh my God, I'm missing out, I'm missing out. You're not missing out. Yes, there's stuff going on right now. Guess what? There will be stuff going on 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Take the time to learn this well because the Web3, even though it's the Wild West and there's that aspect of you're the owner of your content and you're the one who's making the reward on your content and the people who engage are able to also be rewarded for engaging with your content, there's also the fact that there are no custodians per se. You have keys, you have wallets, there's all kinds of things, and I know we'll probably talk about that in a little bit, but there is a responsibility that each of us has when joining Web3 that isn't necessarily on our shoulders on Web 2 or on Web 1. So I also want to be the reality check here for you. Take the time to learn, take the time to understand. Follow folks that are educating or who are willing to guide you. And that's what I'll say for me when Shane got me and my family, because I wasn't going to do this alone. I brought my family on board too. He was our guide. We had a lot of questions. I was like, what does this mean over here? And how does this work? And it was just all, I mean, I'm proficient in Web 2, but the Web 3 felt daunting to me. I was like, I don't understand what this means and what's the behavior I should do here. So have a guide, or if you're going to join, make sure you join with a community. It's much better with other folks that you can learn together. It's like, oh, I did this thing and this is what happens. Like, oh, really? Well, I did this other thing and this is what happened. So I just encourage folks to join, start slowly, start small, take your time. There's so much time before this becomes mainstream, but just kind of learn it at your own pace and do it with a group of friends or have a guide that can help you because in my experience, that made all the difference in my whole onboarding process. And then now where I am here a year later, educating others on how to do this.
Well, and that's a part of the story that you share that I just find absolutely fascinating. So one, I want to commend you for being really transparent and honest about where your own um, concerns and questions and lack of knowledge were, because so many times people, like you said, think just because you're an early adopter, you're a know-it-all. No, we're just willing to make a lot of mistakes.
Right. And hopefully help you avoid those pitfalls. I mean, that's the thing, right? These are the lessons learned. And the key is hopefully if you learn, we can share, like, oh, don't do that thing. Not cool. Here was the bad experience I had. So, yeah, I mean, the early adopters are really great for that if they're willing to share their knowledge. And I have to say, pretty much most early adopters I know are, because we're excited and enthusiastic about something. And how do you get the rest of the world to see what the impact it could have unless you're willing to share both the pros and the cons to the experience?
Mm, love that. Now, everybody might not have a family to go in and experiment on this. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions of how to find people who would have the same curiosity and willingness to go in and do it together, even if it's just a group of 5 people?
Yeah. Well, and I say that right now, if you go on Twitter and if you're someone who's in Twitter spaces as much as I am, you'll see a bunch of spaces about crypto, about Web3, about NFTs, about all different aspects. Go in there, get to know those folks, and then you can follow them and get a sense if they're trustworthy. Again, don't leave your common sense at the Web3 door. I think a lot of times folks are like, it's scary. It's like, well, okay, yes, but Web 2 was scary. I'm on social media and everybody's going to know what I'm doing. And now, yet, it's just a part of our daily life. Or Web 1, I'm going to be online and people can, scam me. And scam is not like it's web or internet specific. People have been getting scammed probably since the early caveman days. People can walk up to you and tell you something and you may believe it, and it could be that they rip you off. It can happen all the time. It happens. It's humans. The behaviors that we have as human beings doesn't change because the technology changes. So again, don't leave your common sense at the Web 3 door. Be realistic on this and make sure that the nice thing about Web 2, I will say, and even Web 3, is that you can do a social media background check on everyone to see if they are who they say they are. And that's why I really like about it, being able to look and see and get a sense of the person, and don't just get swept away by someone saying, exciting things and making you think like I'm going to become rich, in 2 seconds. No, you're not going to become rich in 2 seconds. It's going to take time, just like anything else. But the nice thing is you can be earning while you're developing all those pieces.
And I love that perspective that you share, because so often it's natural human behavior for people to kind of grab onto the negative. Well, so many people have, yeah, they've done well in crypto, but then they lost it all. And I'm just kind of like, okay, so what lens are you going to use when you go inside of blockchain and in your learning? Because you don't necessarily have to go in and do a lot of things monetarily. I mean, that's one of the things that I found really helpful when you and I were talking about this early on is you offered a few pieces of advice of things to go listen to, people to pay attention to what they were talking about.
Hmm.
And you even also um aren't you doing um oh gosh, gee, I can't think of the darn word, but aren't you doing some cool conversations on Twitter around blockchain and
Uh,
content
I
creation?
am actually in. So I started messing around with this in the second time and looking at it in March of last year. In July, I was paying more and more attention, and I thought, the best way. I felt like I wasn't learning fast enough for my own comfort. There's so much to learn, but I also know myself, and for me, the way that I learn is by doing. Hands on, figure it out, make mistakes, and learn. So on July 4th of 2021, I had an idea and I looked up this domain and it was available. It's called Crypto Content Creators. And I bought the domain and then I called my buddy Shane and I said, "Hey Shane, I just bought this domain. How would you like to do a show with me?" He said, "Sure, let's do it." And on July 7th, we recorded episode 1. So we created a video show and then stripped out the audio and turned it into a podcast. We did 5 episodes of the Crypto Content Creators for season 1, and I learned a lot through that process. And it got me more invested in learning about creating content on the blockchain. Then in November, I am the founder of National Podcast Post Month. I started it in 2007, and this past year was year 14. And I thought, okay, there's podcasting DApps, decentralized apps, which are just like something like a Twitter or a Facebook, but for podcasting. And I thought I should take the National Podcast Post Month to the blockchain. And I did. I created a community on the blockchain, and then I put all 30 of my episodes on the blockchain. That was the first time I'd ever done that. And I earned, for the first time in all the years I've been doing this national podcasting event, I earned on every single episode. And it was a shocker to me because it was just people saying, hey, I really like what you're saying. Now, the topic was social media and the blockchain. And it was a micro podcast, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes each episode. So it was a little nugget of information, a little nugget, each thing building on the next thing, because this is a lot to take in. It's a fire hose. There's a whole lot that's familiar, but then there's a whole lot that's not. And then there's the responsibility and the privacy aspect of it that is, definitely on our shoulders as the content creators. So I did those things, and then in January, I created a community on Twitter called Blockchain Creators and did a 31-day challenge where every single day I went live and kind of did similar to what I'd done with social media and blockchain, but it was a live conversation with people in the room. So a lot of Q&A and a lot of me, laying down a concept and then having a conversation around it. And that was a lot of fun. And so the Blockchain Creators is still on Twitter, and I'm going to pick back up the weekly conversation. So I learn by doing, but I don't just learn by doing it for myself. I learn by having the conversations with others. Again, learn, share, grow. And in that way, it's actually increasing my knowledge base. And how can I make it easy for folks to understand the concepting, and then to understand the process, and then to consider onboarding to the blockchain, because it is a process to do that. And I can tell you that I've done it 4 times where I've onboarded someone to the blockchain, and I have epically failed on 3 of them, because I got told, explain it to them, got them on the blockchain, and then they created their account, and then they've never created a single piece of content. And so I like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what's the process that they're like excited about it, and then they go through the process and then they don't do it? The very first post that you're supposed to do when you create your account is an introduction post. And that would stop everybody. They wouldn't know how to do it and they would be nervous. So the fourth person that I onboarded, which was just recently, before I onboarded them, I said, you must have an introduction post ready before we do this process. And they are now in I guess, almost a month that they've been creating content. And that was the biggest thing. So how do you learn? You learn by experimenting, and then you learn what does work. You also learn what doesn't work, and it helps you build the processes much better.
I love that. Boy, talk about a proactive stance. I mean, we talk about it in other areas, but in this space, that was literally learning, failing, and then bringing a piece that needed to be at the beginning of the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, hurdles. Hurdles are what people constantly they're in resistance to all the time. And I'm like, it's just data. It's telling you exactly what you have an opportunity to do different.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go sit down after the data was given to you. Go, oh, that's what you want, and create it.
Yep. Take action. Well, I will say too, just as a life thing, we're heading in a direction, and all of a sudden life knocks you sideways. It comes at you, you weren't expecting it, or there's some kind of barrier in front of you. The reality is that we need to figure out a way to go over it, under it, through it, around it, like whatever it takes, get through it, because what you don't know is that around the corner is something truly amazing. But how will you get to that truly amazing thing that's right around the corner? You don't even know there's a corner. You're being blocked. There's a barrier there. So I encourage folks to think of whatever it takes. If going through it doesn't work, go around it, go under it, go over it, but press forward, because that amazing thing is waiting for you. But if you get stuck, if you stop and you go back the way you came, that amazing thing is going to disappear, because somebody else will find it, because they're going to be the ones that press forward.
Well, and I would also add to that, start practicing on asking. If more people would give themselves permission to make little micro asks more often, then it wouldn't feel so daunting to make what feels like bigger asks that a lot of times to someone like yourself or me or even Giga that's on here, we they're not big asks to us. We're like, oh sure. That realization is such a gold nugget. Please do that. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of navigate a little more, even though we've got 1 foot in the intro and one foot in the present day conversation around blockchain, there is something that was my like moment when we were talking about this, that I don't see enough people talking about. I see them complaining about the impetus that would cause them to want to go on the blockchain, but I don't see them bridging the opportunity of going on the blockchain from the thing they complain about. And that is, in Web 2, we're controlled by another entity. So people are constantly complaining about the algorithm silencing them. They're complaining about being sent to blankety blank jail, and then they can't talk with people online. And they're complaining about getting kicked off. What does that look, or how does that look differently when you're in the blockchain?
So ownership. No one is controlling that. There's a community, and no one can take down anything that you say. They may not like what you say. They can downvote what you say, and downvotes do have a reward system negative effect, but no one can take it down. Because it's peer to peer, because it's global, and even if one server took it down, it's replicated in so many places that it's always going to live forever. So I would say that ownership is a big key, and censorship, a lot of folks are challenged by that. As a matter of fact, my friend Shane told me that what caused him to start looking in this space was that he had written a post that said on Facebook, I don't know if we're supposed to say that, but that said, go vote. It was voting day, not go vote for this person, not go vote for that person, not how you should or shouldn't vote, what you should be voting on, just go vote. Today's voting day. And that post was removed because Facebook decided that that was, I can't remember what the wording is, but he was being, I don't know, I think this was before fake news kind of terminology, but it was a bad post, and he's like, how is that a bad post? I'm not telling anybody who to vote for or why, or just go vote. It's voting day. So that caused him to realize that he was not the owner of this content. And the reality is, none of us are on Web 2. We think we own all that content that we spent years and years and years creating, but the reality is that your account could be shut off in a heartbeat. YouTube could demonetize you, could deplatform you. Anyone can. That's their account. They're publicly traded. They have, stockholders they have to adhere to. There's all these kinds of things that they have pressures on. So it's not like I'm saying they're bad guys. There's a lot of considerations in there, and I'm not saying that it's a bad place to be. I wouldn't be who I am and where I am if it wasn't for Web 2. I wouldn't know a lot of the folks that I know if it wasn't for Web 2, if it wasn't for Twitter, if it wasn't for Facebook, if it wasn't for all these things that we've done together. So I'm not knocking Web 2, please know this. I'm just giving us another option for us to consider for content creation. I certainly am not leaving Web 2. I'm probably more active on Twitter now than I ever have been, than I have been since maybe the early days back in 2007. I'm way more active on Twitter, but I'm also active on the blockchain. And I can tell you that every day that I don't post on the blockchain, and I don't post every day, I should, but I don't. I'm costing myself reward. I'm costing myself value because I'm spending time in other places. But there's value isn't just monetary, right? The value of the network and the connections that I've met on places like Twitter, that has a higher value to me because it expands my network, it expands my knowledge, it expands my community. And so that you can't really quantify that by, an upvote. It's bigger than that. So value is many things, but there's also the fact that the content that I've created on Twitter, I have not earned money from the content itself. I have earned money because I've built my brand, I've built my reputation, I have courses, I have things that I've done. So yes, have I done that? But the actual tweet, no. And I'll give you an example of that. In July, when I was really kind of starting to get deep into this, I decided to do an A/B split test. And at the time, I was baking a lot of bread. I went through a kind of a bread craze. So I created a collage photo of some bread, the dough inside the bread maker, the bread out, the bread sliced with butter on it. And I put it on Twitter, and I also put it on the blockchain. And at the time, on the blockchain, I had 9 people following me. And at the time, on Twitter, I had about 5,000 people following me. And on Twitter, I had 3 little likes, which was like, cool, maybe folks don't like bread or whatever. And then on the blockchain, I had 11 people upvoted, and it equaled a value of 88 cents. And I was like, okay. Um, and I don't get all of that 88 cents, by the way. Let me do a pause, time out here. On the blockchain, when you get value on something, it isn't just value for you as the content creator, it's also value for everyone who engaged in that content. So it's a split. The author or the content creator gets 50% of the value at the end of it. And then the curators, which is what people who engage with the content are called, they're called curators. They split, and it depends on many factors, and we're not going to go into the details here, but I didn't get all 88 cents. I got the less of that. I got about half. But I have 46,000 tweets on Twitter, or maybe 47. I don't know. I have a lot of I have a lot of tweets on Twitter, and I have never earned a penny. So I would take a penny or 44 cents or 3 cents on every single tweet any day of the week. And that was what the big, like, whoa, this is huge. To kind of really recognize the value of the content that we have. And again, I don't designate the value. I create content all the time. Sometimes, it's 100 and something dollars. Sometimes it's no dollars. Sometimes it's 2 cents. Sometimes it's whatever. I create content, and the people who curate that content determine the value. And again, not everything that any of us creates is amazing. Some is okay, some not.
Can you imagine what we could have done for ourselves had we been paid just 2 cents a tweet from 2007 to now?
It's a total game changer. It really is. And again, not that that's the only point, but the ownership piece. Yes, there's the reward system, and but the ownership piece. No one can take anything I've ever done away. They can't take it off. They may not like it. They may say what they want to say on it. No one can stop them from saying what they want to say, but it cannot be taken away. So ownership and a potential for monetization. It's exciting.
Well, the other thought that just came to me as you said that is anytime someone commented on it, even if they didn't, especially if they didn't like it, they're still contributing to you.
Hmm.
So it gives a whole new meaning to haters.
Well, and I've gotten value. So I comment on other people's posts, and if that comment gets upvoted, I get a split on that too. So it's not just the post, the original post. If I never created a piece of original content and all I did is go comment on other people's content and people upvoted those comments, I would still be earning value. So sometimes I earn value on both my original post, someone comments, I comment back, the comment gets upvoted, and I earn value on my own comment from just engaging with it. So there's a lot of ways to earn reward, and this is just a very simplistic description of what it is, because there's secondary tokens, there's a whole lot that we could go into, but this is just a general broad overview. So the ownership and the potential for rewards built into the very framework of creating content on the blockchain is what excites me the most.
Love it. So let's let's shift a little bit. We've talked about how I'm just going to quickly stop video, Susan, because we're recording. When we go into questions, then I'm invite everybody to come back on. So let's shift into talking a little bit about opportunities, since we're already in that space of what opportunities might look like. One of the things that I find really exciting about talking with you, Jennifer, is your mind is like a popcorn machine. Or
Okay.
you make me want to bring out the butter and the junior mints and sprinkle it all on there, because you are just a popcorn machine of helping people to recognize possibility and opportunities. So we've talked about some of that. We've talked about, the value of being on the blockchain, creating some content on the blockchain. And of course, there's a lot of questions that are in between, knowing that and doing it. And so one of the things I'm going to share is that in the follow-up email that I create at the end of the day today, Jennifer actually has a workshop that's coming up. I believe it's this Friday. So I'm going to put that in the email so you guys can do that. I'm also going to share with you, because I think it's already on today's event. You could have already followed her on Twitter, but I will give you all those things to help you reconnect afterwards, because people's minds tend to operate a little differently after they've heard from someone versus before they've heard from someone. So you'll have an opportunity to do that continued education, practical component piece to it. Let's talk about what are some of the opportunities or possibilities that people might not be thinking about. Now, we talked about how, you and I being active on Twitter, we could have done that whole thing on blockchain, could have been a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
what are some other things that you see people who have their own businesses or they're even freelancers doing on the blockchain that they might have done it in Web 2, but it's a game changer when you're doing it on the blockchain? Because after you share that, I'm going to also ask you what Jabeen had a question that perfectly lines with this part of our conversation.
So I think if you, so a lot of times folks are like, well, what would I say over there? Or what would I do? And how do I find people? Again, it's always good to start with others. If not, there are communities very much like groups. And you can find, if you're into photography, if you're into, coffee, if you're into, same thing, same types of things that you'll find on Facebook, but there's communities on the blockchain and you can join there and start engaging with folks there. I'll say that if you're someone who does YouTube videos, there are several versions of like YouTube on the blockchain, and they're called other things because it depends on what blockchain you're on. But those type, you can put your video on there, and from video one, you're able to earn on that monetization aspect and try and grow in your community. So I'll say do the same types of behaviors. It is a little different on the blockchain. I will tell you that I personally am not advising any of my clients to go onto the blockchain as a business at this stage. It's so early. What I am advising those clients to do is to go on as themselves, as a human being, to learn, to get a sense of this. And I'm telling, when I speak to, marketing folks, communicators, when I speak to folks who do what we do, Michelle, I tell them, go in there because you need to learn, not just for you as a human being, but you also need to learn so that you can be prepared to advise your clients. Because the reality is, this is going to become mainstream at some point, and you need to be learning about this now as an individual. And then, as you're learning about it as an individual and earning as an individual, what you can do is you can start, thinking about, well, how would this work for my client if they were on here? Don't put your clients on there now. It's not ready for it. At least that's my own opinion. I've looked around, and to me, it's not ready for the traditional marketing type of thing or their business to go and pitch their products. I feel like right now is too soon because it's still very early in the days, very kind of kumbaya and kind of everybody learning. Be in the flow with that. Learn for yourself as an individual, and then keep in mind where potential opportunities lie for you as a business or as an organization. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't upload videos that have information and education. I think that's true. If you can be informational and educational and somewhat entertaining, that's always going to be a win, no matter what web you're on, Web 2, Web 3. And I'll also consider looking at creating things that are short and sweet and kind of testing things out. Like, even though my entire Web3 experience is an experiment to some extent. I've been doing this a year, but there's still so much I'm figuring things out. I will try something and go, does this work? And I'll create a post to see if that type of content. And when it does, when it falls flat, I know, okay, no. So I'll tell you that I recently created a couple of posts. One was about national days on the web, which I normally don't talk about that stuff. On Web3, I'm usually more human, more Jennifer, and less me as a business person. But I thought, let me just test this out. I just said, hey, whenever I'm looking for types of content to create, always go to the National Day calendar. National Day calendar, they've got good stuff. Here's their link, and it was just a little micro blog post, so like Twitter. I don't know how that's performing because I haven't looked at it. I just did this yesterday, and I'm going to look at it later today. It may get crickets. That may be too businessy for them yet, but I'm still kind of like, I'm going to go, does that get good touches or not? And if it doesn't, then I know, okay. And I'll probably try it again, not that exact microblog post, but something else to kind of see if it's going to get a little traction. So it's not ready for you to tell all your clients to jump on here, but it is ready for you if you're comfortable as an early adopter to start learning it for yourself as a human being, but also to start keeping in mind how potentially some of these pieces could work for your clients. So right now it's a big learning opportunity.
Well, and the thing that lands with me when you and I've talked about this, and I'm sitting here laughing because it gives me an opportunity to share startup grind values again. It is a great place to make friends, give first, help others,
Yep.
build your reputation, find where you jive, where the communities are that are passionate or something that you really care about. That's where I see the space that you're talking about for blockchain right now. So yes, timing is important. Goes back to timing and cycles. What place are we in that timing, and how are you actually going to make sure you benefit from it?
Hmm.
So I think that might be a little bit of an answer to Jabin, but I'll go ahead and just share, since he popped it in here in the chat. He said he's a user experience designer and he'd love to learn how website designs and onboarding designs can help people be onboarded and enter the blockchain space for creators.
Well, boy, howdy, do they need you, because onboarding to the blockchain is not easy at all. It is so cumbersome and clunky, and sometimes you click a link and it works, and other times it doesn't, and sometimes it's not easy right now. I mean, that's why I'm saying don't bring your clients on there. It's still not ready for prime time per se. Um, they need you. I think if you can create a simplified, not to say that there aren't onboarding processes that exist now where they're like, here's how you do it, but the actual experience of onboarding is a bit of a nightmare. I told you I've onboarded 4 people, and for the last 2, it wasn't easy, but we managed to do it. It was a lot of me, having to really work with them because the process is clunky. So, and it varies, because the first 2 that I onboarded were easy, but then they did nothing with it. And it varies. It changes all the time, and it changes from blockchain to blockchain. Some of them are easier than others. It just depends. So I think your user experience thing, if you can find a process that you can maybe help some of the blockchains develop that, because I can tell you right now, the developers that are developing on all the various blockchains, they're busier than ever. They are so busy because they're developing this out because there's more and more interest. And they're trying to grow, but they're trying to grow sustainably. I will tell you right now, blockchain couldn't handle if the whole world came knocking. It's still growing and it's still being developed, and the people who are developing it are human beings. And so if you're able to kind of go into that space, it would be really good for them. You can take a look at what they have and see how it could be made better. I'm working with some of the podcasting decentralized apps, because of course I'm a podcaster first, and that's really where my passion is. I'm trying to get them to embrace the concepting of social audio with some of the tools that they have, and they're in the test market for that. I'm not going to be a beta tester. I'm trying to support them, encourage them to create podcast NFTs, and actually they're like, we're working on something like that. I said I want to be a beta tester for that. So there's a lot of new things that are coming out, but and it depends on, again, blockchain to blockchain. Some of them are more play to earn specific, meaning play to earn is if you like to play video games, you can play video games on the blockchain, but when you play those games, you earn. And some of the things that you earn are in token assets. Some things are, in-game NFTs, and those have their own value. And there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. And some of them are more heavy on that, and others are more content based. Some of them are just blog specific. There's so many out there for you to take a look at. And there's a link I probably can send you, Michelle. I don't have it off the top of my head, that has a list of all of the different decentralized apps, and depending on your focus, you can go and take a look at the blockchain that they're tied to and then do some research. But that's changing all the time because this is a very fast-paced environment. Please know that what you're experiencing now probably is going to change as it's being developed. So again, you've got to be nimble, but you've also got to have that early adopter mindset where you're okay with the constant change. This is not a paved road or even a gravel road or a dirt path. It isn't a highway. It's yet. So if you're willing to kind of help build that and be part of that aspect of helping it grow, it's a great place to be.
I love how you use land and roads as a great metaphor for this, because I'm sitting over here and I'm laughing, wondering, do we have an advantage over people because we both live in Texas and we have access to raw land, to gravel roads, to the biggest interstate in all of the United States is in Houston, the I-10.
Yeah,
So,
it's cross country. You can go from West Coast to East Coast.
oh my God. All right. So I'm going to say out loud for everyone who did choose to join us live today instead of listening to the replay, drop your introduction into the chat. If you have a question, please raise your hand, let me know. I'm happy to bring you back on video and unmute you, and you can ask your question directly to Jennifer. So I also know it sometimes, as soon as someone announces that, my mind goes blank. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to continue talking until I see you guys either dropping something in the chat or raising your hand so that we can unmute you and go forward.
Mhm. Yeah, please ask your questions, folks. I am here. The learning never stops, and perhaps there's something that you're going to ask me that's going to prompt me to go and do some further research. And so please ask away.
I think this would be an excellent opportunity, Jennifer. Tell everybody just a little bit because, we both know learning spaces, workshops, webinars, all those types of things, they all cover different pieces, stages.
Mhm.
And so, what are you going to be offering in what you're going to do this Friday? What are their takeaways? What would they learn should they choose to go to your workshop?
Really, it's that whole piece of, what it is, why it should be paying attention, which we've learned some of that here. And then also how to participate in that space. I think the bigger key is that it's a 4-hour workshop, and at the end, the last hour, we're going to, if folks want to, we're going to onboard them. If you want to,
Oh,
you don't have to, because sometimes you may be like, I just want the information, and that's okay too. And then there's a 30-minute follow-up call the following week. But if folks want to actually join, and they want to join with a community and with a group of folks that are starting at the same time as they are, it's an opportunity for us to do this together. And that's just the way that I have found works best. When you're really doing something different and new, it's best to do it with others so that you're not the only one sitting there going, I don't know what this means. And having a guide, I had a guide, I still have a guide. Shane is still my guide to this day. And I feel like if you have a guide, it just makes it a better experience.
well, and Geeka made an interesting point in the chat, and I loved it because she is a Feldenkrais practitioner, and it's funny because while she's naturally curious, she also admitted just now that she's kind of overwhelmed by these ideas. And I'm sitting here, my brain immediately said, Geeka, what would be a 3 to 5 minute video of a Feldenkrais practice piece that people could do to help them when they're feeling overwhelmed? Could you put together and monetize in both Web 2 and Web 3?
Hmm. Yeah, come on up if you'd like to ask that question. We can have a discussion for sure. You know, I mean, I'm telling you, there's so much out there. Again, take it slow. I know it's overwhelming. I'm trying not to give you the fire hose, but I can't help but give you the fire hose because there's also a lot of terminology. I'd said DApp, and you're like, DApp, decentralized app. What is that? Well, it's like the webs. I'll give you this. Here, this is a good one. So, a blockchain, there's a lot of them out there, but consider a blockchain like a mall. Okay, we know what a mall is. A mall is a building that has lots of stores in it, lots of different places, lots of different things. Whatever you're interested in, the mall has it, right? If you want anything, the mall has it. So, if you think about the blockchain as a mall, and in order to get into the mall, you need to have an account and you need to have the keys to your account. So you have those two pieces of information and you can go into the mall. And once you're in the mall, you can go to any store you want. But instead of stores, it's decentralized apps or like a Facebook or a Twitter or anything like that. But it's not that, it's the blockchain version of that. If you like to make videos, you go to that space, that DApp on the blockchain, which is the mall. So, like that store in the mall. And then if you want to go microblog, you go to that place in the mall, or in this case, the blockchain, right? You do all of those things and you can do them all because you have the one account and the keys that manage your account. So I started using the Lord of the Rings reference of the one account to rule them all. And when I was doing a lot of my training in January, and I didn't know that folks don't know the Lord of the Rings. I was like, really? I'm like,
How
really?
do you not know the Lord of the Rings?
I had people who were like, I don't know, why do you keep saying that? I'm like, oh. So it was a good education point for me to realize that I may think everyone knows the Lord of the Rings and they don't. And yet there were, I would say, 2/3 of the people that were going through the sessions in January did not know the reference, and a third of them did because they're crazy geeky like me. So I thought, okay, I need another way to explain this. And that's when I came up with the mall because I thought people need to understand what the blockchain is. And so it's the mall, it has many things in it. And so instead of stores, it's dApps, decentralized apps, and or platforms like things like a Twitter or a Facebook, but blockchain versions. And you can do whatever you want in those spaces. Now, here's the other beauty of the blockchain. Right now, if you want to follow everything that I'm doing, you have to go to Twitter, twitter.com, facebook.com, linkedin.com, instagram.com, YouTube, whatever my channel is there. You need to go to all those places individually, independently, because they're independent companies. And there's nothing that ties them together except me. But in order to know everything I'm talking about, you've got to go to all those places. The likelihood that someone's going to do that is very low. However, on the blockchain, Jennifer, or ePodcaster, because I'm ePodcaster on Web 2 and I'm ePodcaster on Web 3. ePodcaster, if you go to my profile on the blockchain in the mall, you don't need to go anywhere else because you can see every single thing I've written. You can see every podcast, every microblog post, every blog post, every video, everything, no matter where I did it. If I did it on a microblog, if I did it on the video channel, if I did it in the podcast, it doesn't matter where I did it in the mall. You look at me and you see everything I did in the mall. And so it's a very complete version of you, and it really makes it easy for folks to know. You talk about social media background check. You just look at the one profile and you see everything that that person does, regardless of where they did it. Regardless of if you're into microblogging, you will still see the microblog post. Regardless if you're into podcasting, you will still see the podcasting post. You don't have to be in the same place as I am to be able to see everything I'm doing, and vice versa.
And that's one of the things that I loved in our conversation around the opportunities and the possibilities in
Mm-hmm.
this space is that I'm seeing how it gives us a place where things are more equitable.
Yes.
And because that's a huge piece of my voice and the things that I want to do. And it's just a big red thread for what I vision for the world and how we can progress is how are things equitable and how are they sustainable? Those are like the two drivers for everything that I do. And that looks really different
Mm-hmm.
in the Web3 space and the blockchain.
Yep.
Well, we actually have gone just a couple of minutes over, which, hello, Jennifer and I are not surprised by that because
No.
sometimes it's hard to turn us off. What
True
would be
statement. You should see us in the real world.
what would be something that you would like to summarize for everyone? Because a couple of times you've talked about how you've given them the fire hose, but give them a summary sentence. And thank you, Geeka, for saying she's a little less overwhelmed now.
The mall analogy, right? It helps. It helps a lot. I'll say what I shared earlier, which is we're still very, very early in this space. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling like you missed out or you're feeling like you've got to hurry, 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 because I know if you look at like everyone's talking about NFT this and NFT that, hurry, hurry. No, no, we're still early. Don't believe the hype. I'm going to give you the real talk. And the real talk is that I do see, as someone who is an early adopter, who's been involved in podcasting when I was speaking Klingon, who was involved in social media when I was speaking Klingon, and the rest of the world catches up. I see this in the same way because of the ownership and the reward system that isn't a reward system just one way. It isn't a reward system just for me. It's a reward system for everyone who engages. It's a reward system that goes both ways, which is makes the most sense. When I create content that you find valuable and you engage with that content, you're giving me value back. So shouldn't we both be rewarded? I say yes. So if we look at this, it's time to, start doing the research, and there's still so much time to do the research. So take the time, do not get swept away. You're going to have somebody who's going to hype you up and make you think, oh, I've got to hurry up. Just learn, be in the sponge mode. Take the time to learn and be comfortable at your own pace. Don't feel like you have to rush. Don't feel like you've got to do something if you're uncomfortable. Get comfortable. Learn, 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 learn. And when you're comfortable, when you're ready, take it slow. Create an account, do your introduction post, comment a little bit, see what's going on, get a sense of the lay of the land, and just slowly grow that. And if you're feeling like, well, I don't know, we all started with zero on Web 2. And we all had to do our first post and get to know folks. The same behaviors will be over here. Now, the nice thing about Web 2 and Web 3 is that folks can follow your activity on Web 2. I'll say I'm growing a lot of my Twitter following with the people that I've met on the blockchain. And it's fascinating to have that dual aspect to one another. And it's kind of a shortcut. I'm not really new on the blockchain. If people want to follow me on Twitter or follow me anywhere else, they can really know who Jennifer is. And it shortcuts that learning curve. So I kind of like that.
I love that. I totally forgot what I wanted to summarize because I'm so excited of absorbing what you just shared.
Mm.
And I agree with you. I think too many times. Okay, so now I know what I wanted to say. Just like Kristen Roberts, our IP attorney who talked about NFTs last month, Jennifer just validated and reinforced for you again today. So listen to both these women. It should be a red flag to you if someone's hyping something up. That's what I'd say to you.
Mhm.
Because people in this space who are being in integrity and transparent, and they recognize the opportunities in this space, they know they don't need to hype it up. They know that it's important, as like Jennifer said, for us to just learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. We're not focused on trying to get to a million overnight. That's the kind of behavior that I'm actually looking to escape from our traditional business world, because that's where corruption shows up the most. So we have an opportunity to build a new world where everybody who's participating is being rewarded. Take your time.
Mhm.
Absolutely love it. Jennifer, I want to thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful brain download today on blockchain, as well as content creation and all the different doors that could look like. Again, I'm going to send out an email that'll give you an opportunity to connect with her on multiple different social platforms, but also to attend her workshop that she's having this Friday. And I want to thank everybody who chose to come with us and have this conversation live today. We totally get it. When something's really new, a lot of times it's interesting and challenging to speak up. I would invite you to remember you can always connect with Startup Grind Houston on all our social channels too. If you have questions but you want to ask them in private, DM us. There's your answer. You don't have to ask them in public. You can DM us. You can share with us what surfaced for you, so that we're going to make sure that the next time we invite another talent like Jennifer in our fireside chat space, that they're going to answer the questions that you're looking to learn next. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. And by the way, I'm loving the colors in your background. They're like some of my favorite colors.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and share why I find the blockchain fascinating and rewarding for as a content creator. I think as content creators, it's time for us to have ownership and have the ability to earn from the content that we create and know that it is ours. And I encourage you to connect with myself if you'd like to. I'm ePodcaster everywhere. You find me on Web3, you find me here. I'm ePodcaster. Pretty simple. And of course, that stems from my podcasting roots. But I'm easy to find, and if you'd like to connect, please feel free.
Definitely. So thank you everybody for tuning in today, and we look forward to actually attending Global Online next month in April. So go to startupgrind.com and look for the details on that as well. Thank you.